And welcome, everyone. This is the Mind Sculptors podcast. I am your host, Callahan. And we have a great show lined up for you today, a special episode here on Friday. But before we get into it, I just want to thank everybody for joining us this week. If you like this episode or any of the other episodes or events or content that we link, please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below. If you want access to our Discord server, as well as some extra content, which I'm trying to be consistent on, bear with me, make sure to head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/themindsculptors. Check out the link in the description. Another benefit of the Patreon, before I move on, too, is we oftentimes will go to patrons in our Discord server and ask for what you guys would like or things that you're interested in. So make sure to head on over there. We really appreciate it. It helps us do this and continue to make this content for you. Also, if there are any cards that we talk about today or any decks that you're interested in purchasing, make sure to check out our TCG Player affiliate link down in the description as well. And that will go, we're talking about the MLC today, and that will help go and fund the future MLC, which, contrary to popular belief, is expensive. So, I am joined today by one of my very good friends in the Magic community, somebody that I've actually not gotten to make content with yet, and I'm actually really, it blows me away that you and I talk as much as we do, and have played as much Magic together as we have, and not actually made anything together. But introducing him is my good friend, Ian, or otherwise known as ComedIan MTG. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing pretty good. We had
I realized that Team Turn 3 streams are like the only like content we've made together technically.
I guess we have been on Team Turn 3 together.
But yeah, we haven't like edited something together.
Yeah, I know. This is like the first time we've actually like, and it's funny because it's not the first time you've been on our channel either, but it's the first time you and I have interacted on our channel.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, man.
That's so funny.
But yeah, it's a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
You're one of the good ones.
I appreciate it.
And the reason you're here today is because you won the Major League Commander league that we ran over the summer. And I don't know how else to say it, man. You just kicked ass. Thanks, and ended up finishing, 5-4-1, and with the best record in the whole MLC, and you won the whole thing.
Yeah, it felt pretty good to have the record pay off. I had a history of top fouring without being able to clinch it. So actually being able to like win something felt really good.
Right. So, talking a little bit about that, I know you have top forward a lot of tournaments. Specifically, you top forward, what was it? You top forward, wasn't Crack Open a Kaldheim, was it?
It was the first Tier 1 con.
That's right.
Webcam, and then Marchesa 2021.
That's right.
I think there's other stuff there, but
you top forward in the Playing with Power tournament too a while back too, didn't you?
No, I didn't participate in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never mind. I lied.
Yeah. I actually have a much better success record with league play, ironically.
Yeah.
I won the Season 6 Nexus League, the ranked season, and that was with more wins and the highest win record of any ranked season. So that was kind of how I got into the Mean 16.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, so the Mean 16 was the lead up right before, it was going on right as the front end of the MLC was starting.
Yeah.
So when all of that was going on before, because that was kind of going on even around the time you were drafting, how did that really impact like your start to the season?
So one thing that was lucky about the way those two timelines linked up was that I had my deck list locked in from the Mean 16 for all like 20 something games I played in that I guess the tournament or league. It's hard to call it a tournament when it was a multi-week, like multiple games per week thing. But I guess it was with one single deck. But it was a strange format. Yeah, either way, so that was a locked in thing. So, I had to show up, play a deck that I wouldn't have picked had I had any sort of knowledge of what the meta would look like.
Right.
and then play some games, do decently, and then leave and think about the MLC.
So, so with that, I know that I remembered watching your draft video that you did. And I still think it's one of my favorite things that you've done. Just more, please, as a fan of yours, please more you reacting to stuff, content, please. That's the best.
I wish there was more of a. It's such a weird thing with a multiplayer, like, because when you do like single player Magic, right? You can mute yourself and like yell at chat for like a really long time. But with multiplayer, if you're just like, sorry, 3 people I'm engaged in a game with, I'm gonna go scream for 20 minutes at a play that just happened, and then I unmute and I've done it before. That's how I used to do some of my old content. Was I would deafen and mute myself to talk to the camera, and it was abysmal because I would come back in and they'd be like, good point, and I'd be like, what was the
point? But that was great because in that, like, you would just like, I don't know how many people have watched it. You should absolutely go watch it. It was a delightful hour. Where you would just mute and be like, I can't believe this is still here. I think I might get it. And it was just like, I can't believe Mad Farm is still on the table. Yeah. So take us through what was going on. I know we've talked about it a little bit on the channel before when you were on with Spleen and Scoots and Phoenix. Yeah. But specifically what it was going into the season, what your mindset was on the draft.
Sure. So I had a spreadsheet up of, sort of premier archetypes that I was looking to draft, or premier, I guess, call them archetypes is weird, but like the lists I think were impressive in the database. And because I have an obsessive knowledge of cEDH, I was pretty aware of everything that was on the database in the Brewers Corner at the time. Unfortunately.
It's a blessing and a curse, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I was going through that, and I was working archetypes, and I was a really big fan at the time of drafting of Sans White Nas stuff, which is how we got to my first pick, Yidris. The week beforehand, I had played in one of the tier 1 cons, and I was playing like a Thrasios, Vile Smasher, Song of Creation, Bergie, like just pure Sans White ad nauseum Storm, like just all of that stuff. So that was something I was really high on the week before the MLC started. So that's how I got to Yidris as my first pick. And then the idea from there, which, boy, the apple cart got upset, was to start taking some of my safe picks, which were, things like Dawnmaker Thrasios, Winota.
And those both got picked in the first round.
In the first round. And the other list I had a primer for on the database, which was my Malcolm Vile Smasher Wheels list, and that also got picked up in the first round. And I was like, okay, I am not going to play a deck I am comfortable with. That's okay. But as you mentioned, I then started drafting and freaked out a little bit because Mad Farm was just completely untouched. And I made edits to Mad Farm given the Hull Breacher meta, because Peer into the Abyss had been, speaking of the Mean 16, had just been such a bad card into the Ad Nas meta, or into the Hull Breacher meta, because I was seeing like an average of 2 Hull Breachers a game, and that was like at like minimum. So I was like messing around with some of the numbers in Mad Farm, which is why I don't think it was my most successful deck at the end of the day. Just because I could have tweaked things a little better there. And then round 3 came around. I knew that basically I needed a deck that could really, basically there's a lot of like teamer options. For example, like teamer Poly Tyrant, maybe some of the decks like the Sans Black evolution lists. Right. Basically decks that really just absolutely pants mid-range decks and go over the top of what Stacks decks are trying to do, and don't do like super hot into Turbo Nas decks, right? And so I was looking at those sort of teamer options, and not that they like get whooped by Turbo Nas, but that basically the idea is that they're fine into those matchups, but absolutely like crush mid-range decks. And seeing as that's what most of the database is, that's how I landed on Pako and Haldan, because that deck absolutely is, when it comes to facing off against mid-range decks, it's very hard for them to stop that list.
Yeah. And then you got Kodama Silas.
Yeah. That was sort of the 4th round pick. And if you watch the draft, I was Snooska Martin, who actually top 16'd tier 1 con with that list. So big shout out to him for doing that. he was in chat with me, and I've known Martin for a very long time at this point, or I guess started pandemic. So like, very long time by
long enough, right?
This life standards. Yeah. And he was in chat and he was like, hey, pick Kodama Silas. And I was like, because I had been hyping up Kodama Timna. And I was like, if we get to the round 4 and it's not drafted, I'll do it. And that's how I got to Kodama Silas, even though it is not my play style whatsoever.
Yeah. So when you look at so going into it, right, you kind of were assuming it was going to be a mid-range meta, and did what the meta end up forming into, because it was a very unique meta, right?
Right.
In that only having a single version of each of these decks really changed the landscape of what it would normally look like. And I think a really good example of funny juxtaposition, right, is what preceded us with the Mean 16, where it was like all Turbo Nautilus and then Michael Levine playing Heliod. Right. So like, how did the meta shake out? Was it accurate to what you thought it was going to be going into it, or how different did it end up looking?
I felt pretty correct in my call there. A lot of mid-range piles, feet, whatever was hot at the time. So like sometimes it would be mid-range pile, feet, Turbo Nas. Sometimes it'd be mid-range pile, feet, Reanimator. Because that's like the easiest cEDH deck to make, right? Like, and I'm not trying to offend any brewers out there. I'm just saying, like, it is.
Excuse you, I play mid-range deck. That's all I play.
Well, I know, buddy. Hey, but that is like what a cEDH deck is most of the time, right? It is like some medium speed stuff, some value engine, some interaction, and then your commander and or your color identity do stuff for you, right? And like that's a lot of the decks in the database, and so when that's sort of like the mold that everything else spawns off of, right, we have this big glutton of mid-range stuff in the middle, and it really ended up feeling like it played out that way, even with the outliers there. And in the games with the outliers there were definitely the weird scenarios, right? So like playing against Marwyn, right? Marwyn is able to pop off in certain pods and then like was able to kill me playing Yidris and stuff like that. So like there was definitely a lot of weird combinations. But I think the Simic and or Teamer decks were really favored in that pod, which is why I think like Tatiova was a great pick. I think Teamer Polytyrant was a great pick. I think Pako was a really strong option. Decks like that really circumvent what the rest of the format's trying to do at that moment.
Yeah. Was there a deck that got drafted that really underperformed that you were expecting? Really, not even just yours, but it could be of yours, but it could be of any of the drafted decks that you just expected to do better than it did.
Let's see. I actually had one, but I actually don't know how they finished with it. Oh, okay. So we only played twice. So Timna Krom Breach out of Kai, I was expecting to do decently. Actually, speaking of Kai, Abzan and Kodama stacks, I thought was going to be a force to be reckoned with, and I think he went 0-2-1 with it. I really thought that deck was going to, just with Kodama's ability to break parity on a lot of pods, I thought that deck was going to run away with a lot of games.
Well, I think Kai was not well positioned to place stacks into any pod that had Charles in it.
Valid. Yeah.
Because, and that was kind of, my understanding was his thought process with that was, 2 decks at a table are better than one.
Right.
And so you can kind of play off of each other, but then you run into the issue of that Charles is like an S tier stacks player. And so I think he was kind of disadvantaged by that, but that's interesting. I would have expected Kodama to do better as well.
And there's a lot of just, I mean, flipping through here and, half the time it can be like, okay, what was the pod composition during these games? Cause you have to realize like, there's a lot of scenarios with these decks. Like Mad Farm went 1 and 2. I mean, even my own draft, I thought Mad Farm did pretty poorly for me, to the point where I was very confident not playing it in the finals, even though I was going first. So that was a pretty big shift for me. I'm a little sad Dawnwaker went 0 and 3. I would have thought it would have actually been pretty well positioned into this meta, but I guess not. Because when I was playing it in the pre turbo meta, the one between Flash and the turbo meta, I was absolutely pantsing people with Dawnwaker because I mean, it's playing Seaborn Muse and like a ridiculous amount of interaction and really clean, efficient, infinite mana. Right. And you also don't get targeted like a Turbo Nas deck. Like I really thought that deck was going to really show up for this one. So I was a little surprised by that.
Yeah. So getting into the season, like I said, you went 5-4-1. You got 2 wins on Pako. Well, 3 wins technically on Pako.
Yeah.
And we got 1 on Yidris and, you know, 1 on Mad
2 on Yidris.
2 on Yidris, excuse me.
Yep.
Yeah, you're correct. When it came down to the games that were played, were there any games that you felt like, man, you know, were really good ones or ones that, you know, you might have lost that one just got away? Like, what are some of the highlights of your season to you?
So I think Yidris was a major overperformer last season. I was so close to being 3-0 with that list. The game I lost with it was because, one, Timmy thought of a very clever line of untapping another player's Deathrite Shaman and pinging me to death with it. And then just the fact that it was probably the worst ad nauseum I have ever resolved. Like, I think I had literally 0 fast mana or like a piece of it. And it was an end step Nas.
I have seen... I kind of want to go back. I wish we had recorded every single game, but I think there was an absurd amount of people who resolved ad nauseum and then did not win.
Yep.
It was absolutely, I've never seen that many people not win off of an ad nos.
Yeah. It was a weird sort of feeling in the air. I don't know, something about it. But it was like a turn 3 ad nos at someone's end step that I had the ability to untap and even fire off a Vamp Tutor before my first draw. And the Vamp Tutor was like the best thing. And I got a Dockside, or I could have gotten a Dockside for like 3 mana. And that was the only way I was going to scrounge it. Like it was an atrocious ad nauseum.
Right.
It was garbage. And I was like, this deck is built to be lean and efficient. Because if you're not playing ad nos, you're casting storm stuff.
Right.
So that was a wild game.
Yeah. It's crazy how many times that happens. The game you drew on Mad Farm, if I recall correctly, you were playing against Charles, was it?
Yes, that was the Charles Pongo and someone else game. It must have been that one. Or no, that was the one that Charles won in the last turn. Yes, that was one of our losses. That was a very good game in which Pongo and I were being just like a little too cryptic with our table talk. Yeah. And I think he and I are so used to like just being like, say just enough. But we both were saying just a little too much and we ended up losing because of it. But yeah, so there was that game. And then I'm trying to remember that draw. Man, it was a long, this is a 13-week tournament.
Yeah.
So forgive me if I
well, and that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about too, is because I know you as a player, I'm going to give away one of your secrets, so bear with me, are probably one of the best players at politicking a table, like next to like Reed, right? And how did you feel politicking and table talk played in this format where there were, because you go, this is not to talk down about, you know, other players, but like a tier 1 con, for example, right? Like you're going to end up playing against a lot of not, you know, the top end of who you would normally play. Whereas with this, you know, these are a lot of the people who are like kind of the better players in cEDH. How did politicking and table talk and all of that play into your season from your experience? Yeah,
that's really interesting. So for me, and there are 36 players here, right? So like it is a
32.
32, my bad. The different relationships that I have with all 32 of those people is very spanning, right?
Right.
So for example, we have people like Hire, who was one of the first people I met on the Nexus when I first like jumped into the online community and has known me for like a year now, right? And so we have a very deep relationship as far as like people who know each other for cEDH. And then there's people like Nick from the Tryhards, who I think I've talk to once.
Yeah.
So obviously that range was definitely there. And I actually find it easier for myself to politic with people I know well. And it's not because I like, abuse any familiarity, but it's more like when I genuinely look at somebody, because I had this come up at Tier 1 Con a couple times and just playing games before the tournament or like in general, for me as a person, my style for play is that I never lie. I do not lie in a game. And if anyone even thinks that I lie, I like go out of my way to be like, I'm sorry if you interpreted it this way. I did not mean to lie to you. You know what I mean? It means a lot to me as a person to be very honest. So being able to say stuff like, hey, I do not have anything for this. I need you to trust me here, and have people actually like listen was obviously like just like an ease of a burden there. Right.
Right.
But at the same time, I would play against pods with people like Pongo, and Pongo's like a great mind to this format. And I would be sort of trying to talk and go over threat assessment with the table. And then he would come at me with this really enlightened take that also highlights everything that I am trying to do on my side of the board. And he like read me really well. And I was like, oh, this is going to be an hour and a half song and dance that we're going to go back and forth on.
That's what I get to play Magic with every Sunday.
But it's
Callahan, why don't you win on Team Turn 3 very often? I can't imagine why.
Yeah. But that's why I love playing in pods with people like Spleen and Reed and Pongo. And like, you just really get to do that song and dance for people who are really going to make you work for it. And it's fun. And I definitely, it's interesting having that relationship with people and then having the game stream. Because as we saw with some of the comments halfway through the season, some people weren't like, people who don't know me took me and my familiar language with people, and they were like, oh, Ian's like being sneaky or some ridiculous stuff like that. And I was like, no, I'm talking to my friends during a game. And yeah, I am a passionate player, and I'll admit that comes into my politics a lot, because like when people like come at me during a game when I think they're being wrong, I'll get butthurt about it. I'm not gonna lie. Like, and it's not like any malice towards the people. It's just like, I just think you're evaluating the board wrong, and so those things come up, and it's a nuanced conversation, and it happens all the time in cEDH. It's one of the hardest parts about the format. Right.
So when it got down to the end of the season, you and Rebel were so neck and neck down the stretch. What was going through your head during that last game that you won? I forget what you were playing on that last week.
So I had 2 games to win and in, basically, for the finals. The first game we played and I lost. And that one was a tough break because the game felt like it could have broken a different way. And I was like, okay, I got one more. Like I got to do, or no. Maybe that was my draw. Was that my draw? That was my draw. Okay, now we're starting to get there, right? Because that was the...
Yep, that was the game with Charles on Grand Arbiter, Cameron on Sig, and Bukins was playing Esper midrange.
All right, now we're there. Okay, so yes, that was my draw. And for me, actually, I was really happy about this draw. And the reason for that is because I felt if I had just won a game and gone to the finals going 5-5, as opposed to Rebel's 5-4-1 record, because of the way the breakers worked, right? For me personally, I was like, if I went to the finals about that, I would have felt just like, it wouldn't have felt right to me. So when I got that draw, I said, okay, now I have the opportunity to win my last game and earn my spot in the finals, basically. Right. That was my mentality for it. I'm a very competitive person, even with myself. So, so when I got that draw, I was like, heck yeah. And meanwhile, it's very funny. I was talking to Rebel about this the other day. Rebel's first Trice tournament we played in. And it might have also been my first Trice tournament. And it was like this very weird moment. We like talked afterwards and like stuff like that. And then we had this moment where we were talking right before the finals. We were like, hey, it's kind of funny that we had this like, I don't know, like it's kind of like this anime like ending here where you like fighting till the very end and then like pushing it out in this last game to like clinch my spot, and then As soon as I won my my game, the one that solidified my top final spot, first thing I did was direct message Rebel, and I said, I will see you in the finals.
Yeah.
Because she had been playing brilliantly the entire season, and I was like, I will see you there, and I know you're going to make it. And
the game she played to get in was honestly one of the most incredible games of Magic I think I've ever watched in my life.
Yeah, it was incredible. I caught at least like the first hour of it. I haven't fully watched all the finals yet because Tier 1 Con in no time. Yeah. But I've been catching up on those recently, and that from what I've already seen, the game was insane.
She made decisions in that game that I don't know I could have made. Just to put it that way.
Right.
But so you've got that going on. When it got to the playoff, like you said, you ended up not moving on Mad Farm, which I was very surprised when I was doing my projections. I was fully expecting you going first in that first seed to pick, what was it? Mad Farm.
Yeah.
And you went with Pako, and it almost didn't work out because the pod composition was not ideal for friendly.
Pako. No, it was horrible for Pako, to be honest. But it worked out enough. And the reason I chose Pako was because I had been playing a bunch of games with the deck, right? Not only just like for the actual MLC games, which it came very close to beating cEDH in our semifinals game, or not in our in our regular season game. So it was also close to going 3-0,
right?
That for the season, and it just felt like, this is gonna sound so silly, but like in those when someone who is like specialized with a weapon, they like, you can tell they're comfortable with it, or like a fighting style, or these people who have these things that they are very comfortable with. When I was playing Pako and Haldan, I was like, yes, myself and this deck are in tune. We are speaking the same language. Like it's performing so consistently. Turn 2 Pako, turn 3 Haldan, all this protection up. In that like song we were singing at the same pitch, right? That was happening every single time, and I was like, this is the only deck where I just don't feel a bunch of anxiety about walking into the finals and like slamming it on the table.
Yeah. So when we got to that game, when you saw the decks you were up against, what was your reaction?
Oh man. So I was in the middle of like 2 very rough weeks just in my life. And so I got the pod composition and I was like, yeah, okay, life, I get it. Like, we're doing this again, sure. And I was like, man, I'm not going to cast a single relevant spell out of this pod.
So when you were mulliganing and kind of going into it, and what was it you were looking in for those opening hands?
Oh yeah. So I've been talking about this a lot lately, and it actually got to get shown off really well at Tier 1 Con. I'm a very aggressive mulliganer. When I'm playing a deck that supports that.
Right.
So for example, I'm playing something like Dominic or Thrasios. I'm going to keep a mana dork and some interaction. And
it's like Tim the Thrasios, right? You're just like, hey, dork gonna win. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
This is fine.
So Pako was not only like a deck that I play and play aggressively. It was built by a person who mulligans aggressively. Like Braden's the one who taught me to mull like a psychopath, right? So I mean, obviously,
I think I know where Sage gets it now.
Yes, I genuinely feel like it was many conversations with Braden, and so that I knew that the initial version of the deck was built that way, and I knew I had made changes to the deck to make it even more aggressively so, right? So the deck is just meant to turn 2 Pako, at the latest turn 3 Haldan. Or sometimes you do the turn 2 Haldan because you have Fierce Guardianship or whatever, and your mana's awkward if you really have to get desperate. But you mull aggressively for that. And at Tier 1 Con, I played a feature match where I had to mull down to 4, but got a turn 1 Pako. And I was like, all right, here we go.
Yeah. So you even play, I didn't watch any of Tier 1 Con for what it's worth. I had to work, you guys. But you even played Pako and Haldan at Tier 1 Con.
Yeah. So if I could tell you how comfortable I was.
So you're a believer in the deck now.
I am a Marlene Me 3 Chunky Pubbo Goes Bonk, I believe is my current name for the deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it so much.
So what back to what we were talking about when you were mulliganing, you see, okay, shit, I have to play Inamar, Tinatana. I'm playing against 3 creature decks. This is the worst scenario.
Mm-hmm. I think I kept a land. I think it was land, Dork, Mana Crypt, and then I had to Noxious Revival my own land back on top.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. And I was like, but you know what's a turn 2 Pako, baby? We'll play it.
It's there. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. And then higher Nature's Claim my Mana Crypt. And then I just sort of stress, sweat, tears. And I think I was able to recover pretty decently from that point, but it was definitely not the optimal start by any means.
Right.
Yeah, but obviously, man, Pako is very good. And there's a reason I play Pako and Haldan a lot. But people do tend to overestimate Pako.
Mm-hmm.
And just because it literally gets big, you know what I mean? As opposed to like certain card advantage engines, like you never see the 3 cards that Tymna draws a turn, but you see Pako flip some cards. You see Pako turn into a 13-13, a 14-14, a 17-17, and you're like, oh my God, it has to die.
Right.
And I definitely think there was a bit of that during the game. And I think Rebel almost won had she hit a land drop because I think people were being very aggressive towards Pako. And obviously I won at the very end, but that's because I hit a 50-50 gamble. And if I had whiffed on that, I was pretty
You were out
bad.
of it.
There's a solid chance I don't win if I missed that.
I believe Higher had it on his turn.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly. So
yeah, I had to do some real creative stuff if I didn't hit that gamble.
Yeah. So what was this is the iconic gamble we're talking about, right? Where you literally went full Ken Bauman, you flipped a coin.
Yeah.
What was going through your head as you're like, so what was it you were searching for? I can't remember off the top of my head. Breach. And so you're searching for this, and what's kind of going through your head at that time?
So as much as it's really awesome to be like, wow, there was this sexy 50-50 gamble for the win. Like, holy crap, that was the big game. It was the most free gamble I have ever cast in my entire life because there was a Hull Breacher out and the only other card in my hand was Sylvan Library.
Oh, jeez.
And I was like, well, this card's garbage. So I was like, yeah, 50-50, but like worst case scenario, I pitched the Breach. I still have a garbage card in my hand. I'm casting this gamble, right?
Right.
So that was definitely that. But like it was obviously a huge thing because if I didn't get the Breach there, I go to my extra turn and I have to hit something off the top and it can't be card draw related because the Momentous Fall had been shut off by the fact that Hull Breacher was there.
Right.
And there's a lot of stuff. Speaking of the Underworld Breach combo, really proud of the fact that when I was building the deck, I was like, I think it is ludicrous that the deck is on Breach without Brain Freeze LED. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm putting in Intuition, putting in Brain Freeze LED, like these combos are going in there. And the idea was that like Breach allowed for some like big turns combos, right?
Right.
But I was like, there's no way that having a commander agnostic combo isn't the right call in this deck. And the only dead card is Brain Freeze because LED is stupid in this deck.
Right.
It allows you to desperation
because you're
cast
playing other
Pako.
People's cards, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So you can desperation cast Pako. You can turn 1 Pako and Haldan sometimes with like Jewel Lotus and LED or like turn 2 in a more realistic sense, right? But you can cast your Pako and be like, I have like 2 lands in hand, crack the LED, play Haldan in the same turn. You can also use LED to cast spells with Haldan. So a lot of the times you only have like 2 cards in hand that aren't able to be cast with your commanders. And you can be like, they'll be like, he's tapped out. He can't use any of these counter spells in exile. And you're like, actually, I'm going to crack my LED, throw away this bad hand. And I'm just going to use the counter spells exile with Haldan because they're all from exile. Right. And so, yeah, LED is just really, really strong in that deck.
So I think Alan might have asked you this in the post game. But when you look at Pako and Haldan, obviously you believe in the deck enough to play it at tier 1 con. When it comes to, I'm just going to tell you right now, the thumbnail for this video is Pako and Haldan the best deck in cEDH?
Yikes.
So when you, we're all about that clickbait, baby. Let's gotta get it. It's, God, I hope somebody takes that out of context. When you look at the deck and you evaluate it outside of the MLC, because we've talked about this a lot, is the MLC. The MLC down the stretch had Hull Breacher after it was banned, which shaped even the finals game.
True.
When you look at it as a card, outside of that meta and just going into, an LGS tournament or something like that, how do you feel about it overall?
Pako Haldan. So if you are in one of those LGSs, which I think there's a lot of these, where you are seeing a lot of the sort of like mid-range decks like Urza, if you're seeing a lot of classic Tymna Thrasios, you're seeing Thrasios Bruce, all of these Tassiger, right? Like these are such like classic LGS cEDH decks, right? Except for maybe like Gitrog, right? Like I feel like these are the things you always see in LGS. A lot of these like mid-range grind piles. People are like, hey, my LGS is Urza and Tassiger, and people have been playing the same deck for 13 years. And you're like, that's not even a thing. Right? But like, but you know what I mean?
It's some form of the mimeoplasm pile.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And that's the kind of, I feel like a lot of LGSs look like that. And if you're in that kind of LGS, you slam the ever living heck out of Pako and Haldan, because Pako makes mid-range decks his chew toy.
So when you said that a couple times, but just for the people at home, like I know that because I play mid-range and Phoenix likes Pako and Haldan. So that's fun. But me over here just trying to do Rector shenanigans, and Jeremy's just like, I'm just going to swing this dog at you. Explain what it is about Pako that makes it so good into a mid-range. Sure. So one, you explode in a way that like ad nauseum decks are already good against mid-range decks, right? Like that's kind of just like a fact, unless they're playing the appropriate interaction, but we don't have to get into that here. But with Pako, so like you have like a Dispel, right? And your opponent goes turn 1 Mana Vault, turn 2 Pako. Right. What are you doing with that Dispel? Like, and so a mid-range deck is going to play a Dork. They're going to hold up some interaction, probably not interaction that deals with creatures. And now, so turn 3, you have your Haldan out, right? And you're a mid-range deck, you're not going to beat Pako and Haldan by turn 3. So now Pako has swung twice, right? Once with Haldan on the field. That is 8 cards that a Pako and Haldan player has in their hand, not including the fact that they have a hand. And I don't care if you have a Rhystic Study. I don't care if you have a Sylvan Library. I don't care if you have a Mystic Remora. Those cards are not going to beat the card advantage generated with Pako. Pako is what I like to call a slow ad nauseum. And it's because it's just, it's like the 5 mana and then just every turn, more and more cards. It's like, if you've ever played against a deck that isn't like super turbo, but it resolves a Bolus to Citadel and is just like slowly oppressing you, that's what it's like. And so not only that, but it's also presenting pressure onto the table. So you don't just get to play your creatures for free because Pako is suddenly making you use those creatures as chump blockers. Right. And so it's pressuring your life total. It's pressuring the card advantage on the board. And you can like go and attack its engines, right? You can go and attack Haldan, you can go and attack Pako. But there's a reason I'm playing cards like Misdirection, or in my current version of Pako and Haldan outside the MLC, Mindbreak Trap, right? Like you get to play all these crazy free interaction spells. And you get to play Deflecting Swat and Fierce Guardianship, which work really well with those commanders. And basically, mid-range decks have to pray that they have a Drannith Magistrate on the first couple turns. And that's usually they're out to Pako and Haldan. It is just the card advantage generated can never be beaten by the fair magic that mid-range decks play. And I know it's wild to call cEDH fair magic ever, but like when you look in the context of cEDH, mid-range decks are the fair magic of competitive EDH. Listen, I play Lavinia, and I've had to play Lavinia against Pako many a time.
Oof.
And
GG's.
not a good time. It's not a good time, I'll tell you.
I feel like that is an unwinnable matchup 95% of the time.
It's not unwinnable. It's just not a good time. It's just
fair.
You spend too much of your time having to deal with one person. You don't get to deal with anybody else, which is kind of the issue. But by the way, Cobble, if you're counting, that is my first reference to Lavinia. And I have fulfilled my duty.
Also, I meant to say, Pako Haldan also does pretty decently into stacks as well. Because a lot of the stacks of the format don't really target what you're doing. Like, yes, rule of law effects will shut down your breach lines, but at that point of the game, you pivot.
I guess I'll just smack you in the face instead.
I guess I'll beat you to death, and then like, oh no, I have to use my interaction on your turns. Darn. And then on my turns, I'll develop an engine, or maybe go for an extra turn effect. And like, yeah, you can't loop extra turns, but you know what stinks? 13-13 Pako hitting you, and then a 15-15 Pako hitting you the next turn. Meanwhile, drawing 4 cards, right? Like, stacks have a hard time with that card.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting, and congratulations again for winning. And
thank you.
You know, I didn't technically root for anybody. I did not officially root for anybody, but you were definitely in the group of people that if you won, I would not cry. There wasn't anybody that I would cry if they won, to be fair, but I was happy to see you win.
Thanks, bud.
But I'm glad you were able to stop by, talk about the season, talk about what was going on. For the people at home who, for whatever reason, don't know who you are, where can they find you at?
Yeah, so you can find me at youtube.com/ComedIan MTG. I'm going to make the bold assumption that it will be in the description of this episode.
Yeah. More than likely.
I'll pester you about it. Don't worry.
You know what? Just because you said that, it won't be in there.
No. But the content on the channel, I started out doing like very analytical views on gameplay, and then I realized that a lot of channels like do gameplay really, really well, and that wasn't going to be my niche. So I focused a lot on my favorite videos to make now are top 4 breakdowns. So whenever there's a big tournament, I'll break down every list in the top 4, go into like the nuances of the decks, any specific choices the pilots made. I'll usually have watched the finals, so I can actually comment on like the gameplay, what happened during the game. And you know, usually I participate in 95% of the tournaments in this format, so like I'll usually talk about real experiences I had during the tournament. I do deck techs. I do videos breaking down brand new cards that have been spoiled that are terrifying. Cody. Yeah. And, you know, and stuff like that. So if you're interested in any of that, I've also started a new series that Charles Mono White Guy has been calling my case study series. I've been calling it Experienced cEDH Player Breaks Down, where I'm taking other people's gameplay, people like Playing to Win, Play with Power, and going through their games, and then from an experienced cEDH player's perspective, talking about like nuances in the play decision, how they affected their mulligans, how that changed the course of the game, how turn order affects the game, all stuff like that. So if you're really looking to take a step up as a cEDH player, if you're looking to improve your game, that's the people I'm hoping to help in the format. A lot of people who are like jumping into the format have said they really enjoyed the channel for learning purposes, and that's kind of exactly what I'm hoping to.
It's funny to me because I feel like you have a very misleading channel name, because your name implies that you don't take this shit very seriously, but you honestly are somebody in the format who I think is probably one of the most knowledgeable and most well versed, and probably one of the. You're what I would call the part of the new wave of smart people in the format.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, you know, we've had Cobbles, we've had all these guys, right?
Sure.
There's Ian's popping up around there. And,
it's funny. I actually have referred to myself as Gen 2 before, because there is the original cEDH players, the people who like may or may not have been around the format in the pub stomping days. And now there's like the Gen 2 people who are like, I was playing casual and then someone said I knew how to optimize my decks and now I'm here.
Yep. I fit into the somewhere in between category where I was started playing cEDH around 2016 and just kind of like I was born and raised on Lab Maniacs content. So
right.
But yeah, it's a pleasure having you. I love having you on. And, if you want to react to anything, just give me a call.
It's a good point.
Yeah, I'm always willing to be ridiculous about some shit. But, that about wraps things up for us here today. Just a quick reminder. Like I said, you can go follow Comedian over on his YouTube channel. Also, what's your Twitter handle? If people want to follow you there.
I believe it's just twitter.com/ComedIan MTG.
Okay. You can go follow him over there. You can also follow the Mind Sculptors here at Sculpty Boys, BOIS. Or you can find a direct link in our link tree in the description below. I want to also give an extra thanks to all of our patrons who help keep the lights on. If you too would like to become a patron, you can head on over to patreon.com/themindsculptors or check out the link in the description. Thanks again for joining us today, and from all of us here at the Mind Sculptors, I'm Callahan, and we'll see you next time.
I'm in line with the stars, I'm in sync with the earth. 10 toes deep, flower child from the turf. I never switch sides, like even when I die, I'm a ride for the squad, light up tires in the hearse. I've been on the vibe, kinda hard to describe. I'm in between, I'm good and it's fine, but I'm tired of the grind. Then I come alive in the night to realize I'm in the middle of the time of my life. I'm never so packed for the stack, never lied on the rap, got a bag from the way that I write it. Queen looking Tyson, do that ass survive, doing 80 to the house, then I hit it to the sky, change haters on a tirade. Talking to their grip in the face, be still, let that hate stuff fade. We all want the same, we all want a meal in the safe, I wanna live like I'm trying to reach enlightenment. Trail spill from my lips, feel bent from the bip, take a sip till I pass out. Try and get grit, but it don't make sense, cause you can lose life on this fast route. Yeah, turn thoughts to a cash cow, I might flip that to the glass house. I don't need the accolades, I'm in love with the chase. I just wanna eat, save a spot at the table. Beast with the slap, pin myself on the map. You long with the wind, but we knowing that it's cap. 5-hour flights, couple nights at the flat. To be real, couldn't see me making moves while I'm at. I'm still on the grind, limit time when I chat. I'm burning down sage, keep the demons away. When I write it, give a piece of myself to the page. I don't do it for the